What if I told you that fat is not the reason you're overweight, sick, or struggling with blood sugar? For decades, we were taught to fear fat, avoid butter, choose low fat, eat light, and many of us followed that advice faithfully. Yet obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic disease have only increased. So today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest nutrition myths of all time, the demonization of fat, where it came from, why it failed us, and why it's time to finally unlearn what we were told. If you care about your health, your weight, and your long-term well-being, you'll want to watch this until the end. The fear of dietary fat didn't come from human biology. It came from oversimplified and misinterpreted research in the mid-20th century. Fat, especially animal fat, was blamed for heart disease, and this idea quickly became official dietary policy. As a result, low-fat diets were promoted as healthy, while fat was removed from foods on a massive scale. But here's the problem. When fat disappears, something has to replace it, and that something was sugar and refined carbohydrates. The food industry filled shelves with low-fat, high-sugar products, and people were told to eat them freely. Instead of becoming healthier, people became hungrier. Insulin levels stayed constantly high, and metabolic health declined. Even today, many people with type 2 diabetes are told to avoid fat and red meat, while being encouraged to eat more light or carbohydrate-based foods. This makes absolutely no physiological sense. Diabetes is not a fat problem. It's a problem of carbohydrate intolerance and insulin resistance. Every high-carbohydrate meal raises insulin. Chronically high insulin prevents fat burning and promotes fat storage. So when diabetics are advised to eat less fat and more carbs, their condition often worsens instead of improving. This isn't a failure of willpower. It's a failure of outdated nutritional thinking. We now know that fat is essential for life. It forms cell membranes, hormones, enzymes, and supports brain function. It allows the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Without adequate fat, true satiety and metabolic stability are impossible. The demonization of fat distracted us from the real issue: excess sugar and chronically elevated insulin. To move forward, we must unlearn old dogmas and return to basic human physiology. Fat was never the enemy. The myth was how leptin works and why low glycemic meals create true satiety. Leptin is often called the satiety hormone. It's produced mainly by fat tissue, and its job is to send a message to the brain that says, "We have enough energy. You can stop eating." When leptin signaling works properly, you naturally feel satisfied after a meal. You're calm, focused, and not thinking about food every 30 minutes. This is exactly what happens after a low glycemic meal, a meal that doesn't cause a sharp spike in blood sugar. Low glycemic meals lead to stable blood glucose and a moderate insulin response. In that environment, leptin can do its job effectively. The brain receives the signal of fullness, appetite shuts down, and cravings fade away. But when blood sugar spikes repeatedly, especially from refined carbohydrates and sugar, leptin signaling becomes disrupted. Over time, the brain stops responding properly to leptin, a condition known as leptin resistance. Even though the body has plenty of stored energy, the brain behaves as if it's starving. The result? Constant hunger and overeating. Why excess carbohydrates mean excess insulin. Insulin is not a bad hormone. It's essential for life. But insulin has one main role: to store energy. Every time you eat carbohydrates, insulin is released to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. The problem appears when carbohydrates dominate the diet, and insulin stays elevated for most of the day. Frequent meals, snacks, sugar, bread, pasta, cereal, all of this keeps insulin chronically high. And when insulin is high, fat burning is turned off. You can't burn fat and store fat at the same time. High insulin signals the body to store energy, not release it. This is why someone can eat reasonable portions, even count calories, and still fail to lose weight. Hormones always override calorie math. How sugar turns into fat in the liver. Here's one of the most misunderstood processes in metabolism. When you consume more sugar or carbohydrates than your body can immediately use, the excess glucose is sent to the liver. If glycogen stores are full, the liver converts that extra sugar into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. That newly created fat is then stored in the liver, leading to fatty liver, released into the bloodstream as triglycerides, or deposited as visceral fat around organs. This is the key point. Dietary fat does not automatically become body fat. Excess sugar does, especially in the presence of high insulin. This is why low-fat, high-carbohydrate diets so often fail. People avoid fat, but unknowingly create the perfect hormonal environment for fat storage. What if the reason you feel tired, hungry, and dependent on constant snacks is because you're using the wrong fuel? Most people believe sugar is energy. Coffee, carbs, quick snacks. That's how we're told to power through the day. But the human body was never designed to run primarily on sugar. Today I want to show you why fat is actually the most efficient, stable, and natural source of energy, how it supports your hormones and cells, and why the LCHF approach makes biological sense, especially for metabolic health. If you want steady energy, better focus, and real fat burning, stay with me. Why fat is a key and highly efficient source of energy. Fat versus sugar as fuel. Let's start with the basics. Sugar, in the form of glucose, provides fast energy, but it comes at a cost. Blood sugar rises quickly, insulin spikes, and a short time later, energy crashes. That crash often brings hunger, cravings, and the need for another hit of food. Fat works completely differently. It is a slow-burning, highly efficient fuel. Gram for gram, fat provides more than twice the energy of sugar. More importantly, fat metabolism does not cause dramatic swings in blood sugar or insulin. This means your body can access energy steadily and consistently for hours. This is why people who eat fat-rich meals often report fewer cravings, longer satiety, and stable mental and physical energy throughout the day. The role of fat in hormones, enzymes, and cell membranes. Fat is not just fuel, it is foundational to life. Your body uses fat to build steroid hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol, cell membranes that control how nutrients and signals move in and out of cells, enzymes, and signaling molecules critical for brain and nervous system function. Without adequate fat, the body cannot maintain hormonal balance. Low-fat diets are often associated with fatigue, mood changes, hormonal disruption, and constant hunger, even when calorie intake appears sufficient. Fat is also required for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are essential for immune function, bone health, metabolism, and long-term well-being. No fat means poor nutrient absorption, no matter how clean the diet looks. Why the LCHF, low-carb, high-fat, approach matters. The LCHF approach is based on a simple principle: reduce carbohydrates and sugar, and allow fat to become the primary energy source. By lowering carbohydrate intake, insulin levels drop, fat burning is switched on, blood sugar becomes more stable, hunger and cravings naturally decrease. When the body is no longer forced to rely on constant glucose intake, it regains the ability to use stored body fat as fuel. This metabolic flexibility is especially important for people with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, or weight loss resistance. LCHF is not a fad diet. It is a metabolic strategy that aligns with human physiology. For many people, it restores energy, mental clarity, and a healthy relationship with food. What if I told you that the very thing we were taught to fear for decades might actually be one of the foundations of metabolic health and longevity? What if fat, instead of clogging arteries and shortening life, plays a critical role in hormone balance, blood sugar control, brain health, and aging well? Today we're going to talk about fat not as calories, not as a diet trend, but as a biological necessity. We'll look at why fat is essential for vitamin absorption, why the quality of fat and meat matters, how low-carb nutrition supports people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, and why changing the way we think about fat may be one of the most important health shifts for future generations. If you care about long-term health, not just weight loss, stay with me. Fat as the foundation of metabolic health and longevity. Fat and the absorption of vitamins A, D, E, and K. One of the most overlooked facts in nutrition is that fat is required to absorb essential vitamins, specifically vitamins A, D, E, and K. These are fat-soluble vitamins, meaning they cannot be properly absorbed without dietary fat. Vitamin A supports immune function, vision, and cellular health. Vitamin D plays a major role in immune regulation, hormone balance, and metabolic health. Vitamin E protects cells from oxidative stress. Vitamin K is essential for bone health and proper calcium metabolism. Many people eat healthy diets rich in vegetables but very low in fat, and then wonder why they struggle with fatigue, weak immunity, hormonal issues, or poor recovery. Without adequate fat, even the best nutrients pass through the body underutilized. Long-term, this can accelerate aging and metabolic decline. Why the quality of fat and meat truly matters. Not all fats are equal, and this is a crucial distinction. Natural, minimally processed fats behave very differently in the body compared to industrial, highly refined oils. Healthy fat sources such as olive oil, butter, and fatty fish provide stable energy and essential fatty acids that support cellular integrity and inflammation balance. In contrast, refined seed oils and trans fats are highly unstable and may contribute to oxidative stress and metabolic dysfunction when consumed excessively. The same applies to meat. High-quality meat is not just protein, it also provides natural fats, fat-soluble vitamins, B vitamins, zinc, and highly bioavailable iron. When meat and fat are removed from the diet, they are often replaced with ultra-processed carbohydrates that provide calories without real nourishment. Demonizing fat and meat has not made populations healthier. It has made them overfed but undernourished. Fat and low-carbohydrate nutrition in insulin resistance and diabetes. From a metabolic perspective, fat plays a particularly important role in people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Fat does not significantly raise blood sugar. Carbohydrates do. When carbohydrates are reduced and fat becomes a primary energy source, several beneficial changes often occur. Insulin levels decrease, blood sugar becomes more stable, inflammation markers may improve, the body regains access to stored fat for fuel. Low carbohydrate, higher fat nutrition helps remove the constant insulin stimulus that drives fat storage and metabolic damage. For many people, this leads to improved energy, reduced hunger, better glucose control, and greater metabolic flexibility. This is not about extremes or rigid rules. It's about aligning nutrition with human physiology. Why changing our mindset is critical for future generations. Perhaps the most important issue is not fat itself, but how we think about fat. For decades, entire generations were taught that fat is dangerous and sugar is energy. The result has been a global rise in obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic disease, even among children. If we want future generations to be healthier, we must stop passing down outdated nutritional fears. Children should grow up understanding that fat is not the enemy, that whole foods matter, and that metabolic health is built over a lifetime, not fixed with quick solutions. Changing the narrative around fat is not about trends. It's about restoring biological understanding and giving people the tools to make informed decisions about their health.